What is going on, everybody? Long time, no see, no speak, but never fear. Travis Fowler Harkrider is here, back again with a new name, a new edition of the podcast. The once known as the Four Corner Podcast has now been rebranded to the Tights and Turnbuckles Podcast, where we talk about the in-ring and outside ring antics in this wild and crazy world of professional wrestling. It's the same subject, same host, same goofy interactive experience, the cheesy experience that you've come to expect from myself. But honestly, this is something that I enjoy doing. I love being able to talk about professional wrestling and interact with other professional wrestling fans. My personal circle is a very tight-knit one, and I don't really get to geek out over a whole lot of wrestling things with them. So this has been a nice outlet to do that with other passionate professional wrestling fans, and I'm so glad to be back doing it. Well, let's not go on to soapboxes, and let's just get right into it, and let's talk wrestling, because a lot's taken place since the last time I did one of these, and we've seen so much happen. We had the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments take place, which I was excited that they came back. I was also very hyped that they actually did what I feel like should have always been the case, and award title matches at SummerSlam to the winners of the King and Queen of the Ring tournaments. That to me is what it should have always been, because that is like the Royal Rumble for the WrestleMania, King of the Ring for SummerSlam. I love the correlation, and I'm glad they went with it. I hope it sticks and they continue to do this. We had Forbidden Door take place, and that's always been a high-profile event because of the New Japan crossover with AEW, and they had a great main event with Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. Professional wrestling is on fire, and honestly, we've talked about Forbidden Doors before. Specifically, the AEW New Japan relationship. We can add CMLL into that as well. But during our hiatus, one thing that happened that honestly I never thought would happen is what has been referred to as the prohibited portal by one Jordan Grace, who shockingly made an appearance on NXT television. I know that threw a lot of people for a loop, including myself, but in the best way, because now we can honestly say with Jordan Grace's crossover, and in the weeks that have followed, we have seen Joe Hendry appear. We've seen NXT people over on TNA. Honestly, this is the time where we can now say officially this is a different WWE, because who would have thought we would have reached this point where WWE is now doing crossovers with other promotions? I certainly didn't expect that, and I would be safe to assume that if one particular person was still in charge, we probably wouldn't be witnessing this anyway. But not only is WWE doing crossover work with TNA, they have been doing work with Pro Wrestling Noah in Japan, along with the new Mari Gold promotion, both which had two representatives of WWE compete on their shows respectively. AJ Styles showed up for Pro Wrestling Noah, and Io Sky also competed at Mari Gold, and both had phenomenal matches. And the fact that I'm even talking about this out loud still just boggles my mind that this is the state of the pro wrestling world that we're living in now. Even as much as to follow, there has been rumors that WWE is doing potential dealings with the AAA promotion down in Mexico. We are literally seeing WWE do things that nobody would have anticipated. And like I said, if one person was still in charge, this wouldn't be happening. But now that we have the creative team that we do, and the direction that Paul Triple H Levesque has taken with the WWE has proven to be quite successful. I mean, we also had the announcement on the AEW New Japan front that there is a new pay-per-view for New Japan that takes place the day after Wrestle Kingdom, which is their WrestleMania essentially. Wrestle Dynasty is going to bring together the promotions of New Japan, AEW, ROH, which in my opinion should just kind of be right with AEW, but that's another thing. CMLL and the Stardom promotion all are supposed to have representation with this Wrestle Dynasty pay-per-view that takes place in January on the 5th. Again, the day after Wrestle Kingdom. And that's crazy to me that we have so much wrestling content and so much crossovers happening that it just makes for such an intriguing time in the wrestling world. And it also brings my thought to be, maybe this will be the start of potentially seeing the biggest crossover that could take place. And I think we all know what that's referring to. Maybe one day we will see an AEW and WWE crossover. Swerve Strickland even made mention that he feels like now would be the right time for that to happen. And honestly, I don't disagree with that logic or thought process, because it would be great for all companies involved. Think of this. Wrestling is becoming a popular thing once again. It has been on fire since the beginning of this year. And you got to thank WWE a lot for that because of the record business they've been doing over the last couple of years. I even will say you've got to give credit to AEW in that same regard, because had it not been for them becoming the alternative promotion in 2019, who's to say that we are at this point? Who's to say that we have all of these exciting things in the wrestling world taking place? I don't know if wrestling looks the same had AEW not come into existence. The fact we have so much wrestling now is amazing. I cannot overstate enough how big of a deal it is to have so much wrestling content to consume. And I didn't even mention MLW or GCW. So much to tune into. So much is going on, and you never know who can pop up where. GCW has even done dealings with WWE as part of this crossover as well, with Bloodsport and Josh Barnett. Which, by the way, Shayna Baszler and the Creed brothers are going back to compete at Bloodsport at the end of the month. So this is just amazing things taking place. And also, the WWE TNA crossover, or as the NXT has been the referred to name of this, because it has been predominantly NXT and TNA. I still love it because I believe NXT is one of, if not the best wrestling show overall in all of pro wrestling right now. And TNA is getting great exposure, and I do believe that that exposure has helped out with TNA's Slammiversary pay-per-view, because that show is officially sold out. It had a 4,000 seat capacity that is going to host the event, and the venue officially announced that tickets have been completely sold out. It's the first time that TNA has had a sellout to this magnitude in over a decade. And I think the crossover with WWE and the NXT brand has gone a long way to help with this success. I'm very happy for TNA. I'm so glad that they're making a little bit more noise and people are becoming more focused back on them because of this crossover. It also leads to believe that there's going to be certain talents in TNA that will more than likely make jumps to WWE once their contracts expire. As it's been noted, Jordan Grace's contract with TNA expires coming up in January, along with Josh Alexander, who I think we're just on the precipice of him showing up as part of this crossover, especially now that his former The North tag team partner is the NXT champion, one All Ego Ethan Page, who is getting to showcase his talents in a way that he wasn't able to do so with AEW, now is doing so with the NXT brand. I feel like that's just right there. We're so close to it. We've also finally got the Rascals reunion, which is what I had been waiting for since this crossover happened. So I was stoked for that. There's just so much going on. Joe Hendry, who is a TNA guy, has the most social media views of any WWE video since he made that first appearance on NXT in the Battle Royal. He showed up again this past week to team with Trick Williams in a good tag team outing, and reportedly, he is now listed on WWE's internal roster as well, which they don't do that unless they have plans for you, and who's to say that they don't have plans that could eventually see him as being a full-fledged member of the WWE roster, specifically even on the NXT brand. I think he fits perfect too. He's a character. People love him. People know him. There's a lot you can do with a Joe Hendry, and I think we are going to see little bits of that start showing more and more as these weeks continue to go. But, let's leave WWE and TNA alone for just a little bit and talk about AEW, who I believe should be commended with some of the improvements that they have been making. I understand there's this whole TNA, or, well, what used to be TNA lull, I think you can now call AEW lull, because people will continue to point at the ratings, for instance, which some people put stock into that, some don't. I'm a big fan of Eric Bischoff, and he has talked about it numerous times about the falling viewership of AEW. And to a point, he's right. Like, that was something that I think a lot of people forget, is that Eric Bischoff is a very smart individual when it comes to ratings in professional wrestling. I mean, as many people who paid any kind of attention to that Who Killed WCW documentary, or even in wrestling as a whole, Eric Bischoff is the only man to ever go head-to-head with Vince McMahon, head-to-head, and beat him for 83 straight weeks. Nobody else has that distinction. So he's one of the smartest individuals you could listen to. He's pointed out their issues of, hey, you're not drawing in more viewership. You're actually losing viewership, which was true. Now, it looks like we're starting to get more of a consistency when it comes to at least the viewership tapering off. The last couple weeks have seen AEW hover right around the 680,000 viewership mark. And I think they can really start building back that company's viewership. And I think they're starting to do so, because I've noticed, and I don't know if anybody else has, AEW is starting to bring a little bit more attention towards the storytelling aspect of professional wrestling. That's been Eric Bischoff's gripe. That's been my gripe. That's been a lot of people's gripe, is that matches are great. And you can have dream matches all day long, and they will be spectacular. If your goal is to get star ratings from a guy who's never competed in a wrestling ring, much less even been a foothold backstage type of guy for wrestling, he just literally puts his opinions out there on matches and people go gaga over it, whether it be for the negative or the positive. That shouldn't be what wrestling is about, because everybody is going to have their own opinions. Opinions are subjective. We all have them. What is a good match? What is a bad match? But one thing that has been proven true when it comes to pro wrestling is that while wrestling matches are great, the wrestlers are great. They can have great matches. Great matches will only take you so far. The stories are what drive people to tune in and to come back to watch your show. That is starting to show evident with AEW. And I want to bring something to focus about this subject, and it actually proves my point. AEW has a number of stories. I'd say at least 3 to 4 good storylines going right now. One of them is Britt Baker and Mercedes Moné over the TBS Championship. Something that I looked up before I started recording this episode was I wanted to see if my theory was correct. And the segment between Moné and Baker from not this past week's episode of Dynamite, but last week's episode, it has currently over 500,000 views plus on YouTube for their segment, which was about a 14-minute segment. Just about every other video that they posted from that episode of Dynamite is considerably less views. All the matches had less viewership on YouTube than the Britt Baker and Mercedes Moné segment. And that again just goes to show stories bring viewership increases, and you can use the stories to intrigue people to watch a great match, which can bring them back to your product. And I do believe AEW is starting to find that formula. They've got, like I said, a few storylines right now. The MJF storyline, which involves Danny Garcia as well as Will Ospreay. I'm surprised that they have gone this route with Ospreay, as I mentioned on our TikTok channel, which, yes, we are on TikTok now. I put up a video talking about how this week's episode of Dynamite is their 250th episode, and they are advertising MJF against Will Ospreay. Two guys who I think are two of the three main thresholds for AEW currently. The third being Swerve Strickland. And I don't know, honestly, if this was the right move to make. I do think it does have a little bit of hot shot booking, but I think it depends on how they go about the match. I've seen people who have commented on that TikTok video talking about how maybe they're going to set up for a DQ finish, which takes them to Wembley, as I believe it is a Wembley-worthy match. That's why I'm so surprised that it's on Dynamite. But we'll wait and see where that goes. Along with that story, you've got now Timeless Toni Storm and Mariah May building up their story, which I was shocked to see Mariah be the one to turn on Toni, as I fully expected eventually Toni Storm to turn on Mariah. But at the same time, Toni Storm has done a wonderful job with this Timeless character. Everybody loves it. She has reinvigorated her career through this gimmick change, and she has played it flawlessly. And I think this rivalry between her and Mariah could have some great legs to it. Same with Britt Baker and Mercedes Moné, as I believe that there is probably real animosity there, similar to what Baker thought of Saraya when she showed up in AEW. You've got the world title picture with Swerve Strickland right now, and he's going to be going up against Bryan Danielson, but the Hangman Page element is still lurking in the background there, because that's why Hangman came back, was to get back at Swerve. This could be an intriguing situation too. Bryan Danielson's also in the final, I'd say, months of his last full year as a full-time competitor. So what's going to happen there? These are all questions that stories have built up, and they make me want to come back and see what happens the following week. And AEW is finally, I think, getting that. They are doing a fantabulous job of making me want to come back and see what happens. Wednesday is going to be no different. I can't wait to see what happens on Dynamite, and I am intrigued to see what happens with MJF and Will Ospreay. Also, as another little side note to my argument here, Collision last night had an angle where they stripped the Bullet Club Gold, or Bang Bang Gang, whichever you want to call them, of the Trios Championships. Just so you know, out of everything that's been posted about Collision from last night so far, that has the most viewership as well. So, just saying, I think the point's being proven right in front of your eyes. But I do want to flip back over to the WWE, because one of the announcements that took place at Money in the Bank last week, which overall I didn't think Money in the Bank was a bad show, but I think Heatwave on the NXT side actually beat it and was a better show, quite frankly. It almost feels like we're going back to the Black and Gold era, where NXT Black and Gold would put on amazing, in this case, PLEs compared to the main roster's PLEs. But that's for a different time, different story, another time, another place. The return of one of my favorite pay-per-view names, Bad Blood, is official, and it takes place, I believe, October the 5th in Atlanta, Georgia. I am so happy that this pay-per-view is returning. I've always enjoyed the name, and it also is returning on the to-date Hell in the Cell 1 anniversary. That's right. Shawn Michaels and Undertaker competed in the very first Hell in the Cell at the very same event. 27 years it will be to the date that takes place. Honestly, there's only one match right now that I severely hope is what's on that card, because there's no other match that I think would be fitting for the Hell in the Cell stipulation. And I know it's all going to depend on what happens with recovery and being cleared to compete, and I really hope that they can get here. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre have been amazing at telling this story between the two of them. I hope Punk gets cleared for SummerSlam so we can see this first one-on-one match, because I do think that this is the only feud to this moment that is worthy of stepping inside Hell in the Cell. I know a lot of people, and Punk even joked about it when they were in France, I believe. Somebody had said that they would love for Punk and Drew's first match to be a Hell in the Cell match. And he had made a joke talking about how, well, I'm glad that you're not booking the shows, because that's not the first match that you need between the two of them. And I agree. You don't want Hell in the Cell to be the first match between them. That should be the blow-off match. And I hope we get there, as I feel like that story is the, again, only one that fits the Hell in the Cell mold for what it was originally intended for. But honestly, WWE has about 4 stories that they are leaning on right now, and all of them have been good, in my opinion. Drew McIntyre's CM Punk is great. The world title scene with Damian Priest is very intriguing right now, because you've got the elements of Gunter and now Seth Rollins back into the picture, which has been great seeing Seth back. It looks like he feels reinvigorated himself, and it looks like we are back to a little bit of a serious Seth. Yes, he still has the flamboyant visionary thing going, which fits him, but he has that hint of edge to him that we saw displayed during his promo battle with Punk on Monday. Also, Rhea Ripley's back, and the Dominic Mysterio, Liv Morgan saga has had a little chink thrown into it with Rhea Ripley. I love how this whole feud has been playing off, and it's doing wonders for everybody involved. We've also got the Wyatt Six that have shown up and seemingly have targeted Chad Gable as their first victim. All the while, we're seeing a little bit of what Bo Dallas could do that I don't think we've ever seen him do before. The Bo Leave character was great. His work in the B-list was okay. But I don't think we have ever seen this side of Bo Dallas, and I've enjoyed it. I think this has been a great start for the Wyatt Six. I look forward to seeing what comes next. I really am hoping that this Wyatt Six continues to go in the direction it is, because I feel like that's the path that's going to lead to the overall success, and they're doing everything right for it. It keeps you wanting more. On SmackDown, the Bloodline 2.0 has been running roughshod, and while it looked like the Bloodline story had kind of faded off a little bit after Mania, they have come back full force, because you can hear the crowd chanting, "We want Roman. When is Roman coming back? Is he coming back?" He's definitely coming back. But how long is this Bloodline 2.0 going to reign over WWE until his return? You've also got the elements of Randy Orton and Kevin Owens teaming with Cody during this whole saga. What does Cody feel about this? Can he really even trust Randy Orton, since there was a little bit of a look at with that title this past Friday on SmackDown? DIY is the tag champions over there. They've been feuding with A-Town Down Under, who Austin Theory is starting to creep and realize that maybe Grayson Waller isn't the friend that he thought he was. And on top of that, as I've also stated on a video on TikTok, one of the potential signings for WWE, the Motor City Machine Guns, if they get involved with DIY, we're going to see tag team matches that are in freaking sane, and I so hope that we get there. But those 4 main stories, the Bloodline, Dom, Rhea, and Liv. You've got the Wyatt Six. You've got the world title scene. So much good stuff is going on in WWE. So much good stuff is going on in AEW. Every week I'm excited to see what happens in professional wrestling, and honestly, I haven't felt this way since I was a little kid, and being able to have that feeling of nostalgia hit me once again with legitimate excitement has done nothing to my fandom except make it grow more. Honestly, wrestling is cool. Wrestling has always been cool for yours truly, and I can't wait to see what comes next. And honestly, guys, that's the end of our show for this first edition of the newly named or christened Tights and Turnbuckles. What do you think of the name? What do you think of WWE and AEW overall? Are you enjoying the crossovers for both companies? Sound off in those comments down below. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and like I stated, we are now finally on TikTok as well. Guys, This has been fun. I really miss doing this, and I hope you'll come back next week for another edition of TNT, Tights and Turnbuckles. But until that time, take care, have a great week, and continue to love pro wrestling.